Hi, I'm Susan Cauley, and welcome to You're Not Alone, Surviving Your Child's Disability. Financial planning can be a formidable task for most parents of children with special needs who are struggling to survive with the demands of everyday living. Here to examine this problematic issue is Cynthia Haddad and John Nadworny, both certified financial planners and directors of special needs financial planning, and co-authors of the book The Special Needs Planning Guide, and Alexandria Nadworny, certified financial planner, all of the special needs financial planning team at Shepherd Financial Partners in Winchester. Hi, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning. Hi.
Why is financial planning so important for families having members with special needs?
Susan, unlike traditional financial planning, and if you have a family member with special needs, it's really planning for 2 generations. And it's also more comprehensive, that we have different factors that we have to tend to. We call them the 5 factors of special needs financial planning. So we're looking at the family and support factors, the emotional factors, the financial factors, the legal factors, and the government benefits.
Wow.
So that's pretty comprehensive. And again, we're planning for 2 generations and also trying to plan according to the different services and supports of eligibility for different benefits.
You have anything to add to that, John?
I think the concept, what we do in financial planning for people with special needs is really do the basic planning of a typical family. We overlay the needs of the child on top of that basic plan. We found is that you have to plan for both the parents, for their financial security, as well as for the child, the other family member.
Right, and you have to also plan for the children after the parents are deceased too. Alexandra, do you have anything to say?
So yeah, adding the siblings as well, so including the entire family. So it's not just really about the parents, it's about the entire family as a whole, and how you can, pass on that information to everybody involved.
I think a lot of people probably feel like financial planning is just the aspect of financial planning, money and where it's going to go and how much money they're going to need. But clearly it's more than that. It's a lot of legal issues and government programs that you have to take into consideration. When should parents begin financial planning for their child with a disability? Should they start right away, or can they wait until things settle down a little bit after their diagnosis?
We always say as soon as possible, but that's not always what the reality of it.
I think the thing is too is that it comes back to the 5 factors. Is we were actually writing the book, we're thinking about what process do we go through with families. The fact is that sometimes families just aren't ready to think ahead. They live day to day. If you have a young child with special needs, the day-to-day issues of the hospital, just emotionally accepting the fact is that life is different. So I think from our perspective with families, you say as soon as you can, but on the other side, we as professionals have to respect a person's feelings, their emotions, all their dynamics, and our job is really to help them guide through this process.
Right. I think that's admirable, actually, because I know parents usually are totally at a loss when they first find out about their child. And I know on a personal note, I had no clue about what I was getting involved with, so it's very difficult.
Our book is broken down into different stages for families. So, for example, a child 0 to 3, there are certain things that parents should be planning. And as the next planning pressure point might be when they transition. So at 15 or 16, and then at age 18, there's different planning pressure points. There's certain things that really should be done.
Right.
And then once they turn 22 and beyond.
So when should a parents actually start this process? How do they start it? I mean, there's so much to take into consideration. What is the starting point for them?
Maybe Alex can answer this, because I know as a dad in the financial planning profession before I had James, I knew I had to do something.
Right.
And I knew I had to do it fast. But the problem was that even in that business, I realized that this was a pretty daunting task. So the sooner you start the process, the better. And we would always encourage someone, you take it a step at a time. It can be overwhelming, but if you have someone that can help you, shepherd you along the way, it really doesn't make it so daunting. Someone can help you prioritize what you have to do and move on.
Yeah, so I think, kind of focusing on your personal financial security too, and then, layering in the special needs financial planning. So, going through the timeline and different pressure points is, depending on when you're kind of ready to start thinking about this, the sooner the better, but using those pressure points to
Can you describe what these pressure points are? I mean, just certain times in the child's life, is that what the pressure points are?
So there's different entitlements and eligibilities at different ages. So like at age 18, that's when you can be, SSI, Social Security income. So, and then also Medicaid. So different, layers of benefits that could be available to you at different ages. So that's kind of another thing to think about. So planning before that, making sure that you don't lose eligibility for that because of having assets in your name. So that's kind of common thing to think about. And then also, being flexible with your planning. So setting money aside in different avenues for the planning.
I think the other part would be age 22, where the entitlements end. And I think it's taken a long time for us to work with families to almost educate them to say, when you were in school, these are legal entitlements to services. You had an education plan. You could hire an attorney, go through the process, hire an advocate. When you're 22, really, at the end of the day here, it really depends upon the state has money, has funds available if your child's fortunate enough to be prioritized. So we think age 22 is a major turning point because it affects the emotions. A family member, the bus is no longer there. How do I deal with that? The financial aspects, usually at that point, a family member gets addressing retirement issues. So I would say that would be one of the major pressure points also.
Okay. What type of goals should parents develop for both the current aspects and future aspects of financial planning? What type of goals are attainable, in other words?
Well, we always say that there's a common denominator, a common goal with most families that have a child with disabilities to create the best life that they can for their son or daughter. And that's a general goal, right? Wouldn't you say that's what we hear most?
Yeah, I think the whole family as a whole, making sure that everybody's, achieving their personal goals and living a full life.
I think the thing is, from our aspect too, is that a family member, mother, father, whatever, sibling, always wants to have the best thing for their child. I think from our role too, as responsible planners, to really help parents crisply identify what their goals are, and navigate them through the process. Are these goals achievable based upon a child's needs? The financial requirements could be very, very significant. We work with people to maximize government benefits, but at the same time help them shape their goals so that they really can be an attainable financial goal for themselves as well as their family member.
Right. What long-term issues should the family consider when making a financial plan? What long-term issues, for instance, down the road, what would their living situation, and where they will be, when, the parents are no longer around. Who's going to take care of them, that type of thing. And what about the non-disabled children?
Right. Alex and I are both siblings of brothers with special needs, so we're always promoting, don't forget about us, don't forget about us, right? And so it's often a challenge for families to plan what is equal is not always fair, and what is fair is not always equal. So we have to come up with a creative balance of how do we address the two. But some of the longer term, families are very concerned about if they die too soon.
Right.
And how will my child survive, and what will that look like? Also, what if I live a good long life and I don't have enough money to provide for myself and my son or daughter, as well as the other children's maybe education weddings or just gifting to them as well, and treating them, again, equal and fair is not always equal. So there's a lot of planning that goes in, a lot of thought that we go into that.
Okay, can someone describe what a letter of intent is and who is it for?
So the letter of intent is a document. It's not a legal binding document that's typically used by future caregivers or siblings, cousins. I think as many people as possible, kind of, to having a copy of the letter of intent. And what it is it's a document that can list down all the different medical doctors, all of the different important people in your child's life, all of the knowledge that a parent or even a sibling may have in their mind that would be helpful to the next generation that would take care of their child. So if a parent were to get up and leave for dinner even, usually there's like a list of different things that somebody that would take their place for a couple of hours would be doing. So this is a document that would help for many years down the road with taking care of your child. What your wishes are for your child, what the vision is as a whole. It's something that you can actually do as a family together, to set goals and listing all the important people in your life. And there's a copy on our website too, so that people can download.
I think too the other part would be this: it helps to create a vision. Personally, when we went through it with our son James, what he did going through and filling out this letter of intent, it helped at least me articulate where we want him to, where he is today, where we want him to be in the future. And just to emphasize the point that Alex had here, is that we always say, if you were planning a week away, what would you do? As a parent, you were leaving, let's say you were going to Europe, and there was you could only be reached by phone and maybe an email, what would the parent do? That would probably be a big laundry list of things to do. Mm-hmm. The thing is, we say, what would happen if you were never to return? The letter of intent accomplishes this. It goes through a series of questions, helps people think about what they really do for their child each day, and it's a guide for someone to really navigate the world ahead when they're no longer here. Mm-hmm.
It's also important to update it, and we often recommend on the child's birthday. And one of our clients, she gives a red folder at Christmas time to all the future caretakers in her son's life. But it's important to have that.
So it's basically for the caretakers, and it's not binding? Is that what
Correct.
You're saying?
It's
and
not
also
legally
not
binding.
legally binding?
Right.
Okay.
But it's a good guide even for trustees or for future guardians of how to spend the money. What are some of the things that you would want for your child? Do you want them to have trips and activities, and how involved in people's lives do you want them to be? So it's helpful for everybody.
Yeah. When do you create, now, instead of the letter of intent, when would you create a will? And what should the will contain? Should it contain some of the information that's in the letter of intent?
Well, a will is a one-time dump of an estate, for lack of a better word. But it takes on the event of just a one time when the parent dies, and it distributes your estate according whatever's owned in your name individually. But a lot of things don't go through the will, so it's important to do more comprehensive estate planning than just a will. You want to make sure there's a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy. We're not attorneys, but we work with attorneys all the time, and it's important to make sure you have a knowledgeable attorney that knows about disability law and the different types of trusts that are available, the special needs trusts that we would incorporate in the will. So a will would be important to name a guardian for your son or daughter.
Okay.
And who would be a successor guardian if that's important.
Now, what happens if you've already obviously picked out a guardian for when they turn 22? I mean, that's an important issue as well. But is that for something like, for instance, say for instance, you're the guardian of your child.
Right.
Then you'd have to pick out somebody else that would follow suit.
Right.
And how would you do that legally?
To be your successor?
Yeah.
Guardian. So you could either name that individual in your will, or you can make them a co-guardian with you during your lifetime.
I see. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any issues about the will?
think the will is a basic, it's
very basic.
very, very basic document. It just distributes assets, which really a lot of times is to make sure that family members, that the person does have a special needs trust as part of the estate plan. So you have a will as one component of the estate plan, then as Cindy mentioned, another component of that estate plan will be, typically would be a special needs trust, or a family trust for other children who are not yet adults where they can make their own decisions.
Yeah. Can you describe what the special needs trust is? Anybody?
That's Cindy Farr. and what it is too, in our team, each of us has, I would say, our specialties.
Right.
That's
and then
right.
one of the nice thing about working together is a lot of these specific estate planning questions I will defer to Cindy on, but collectively as a team together, we kind of hit all the various 5 factors that we talk about.
Great.
And when it comes to wealth management, that's John.
Oh, okay.
So we have a nice balance, and the
Good.
financial planning is Alex, and I think the 3 of us,
You
we
do
have
a
good
great
team.
job.
Yeah, thank you.
But anyway,
Okay,
circle back.
so with this,
Going back to the special
the
needs
special needs
trust.
trust. Special needs trust is a legal document, and it's very
Okay.
important that you do have a qualified disability law attorney that will draft that trust, because the language in that trust is critical to protect your child's eligibility for government benefits. It is a trust is an instrument that will allow you to leave money to an individual, which is called the beneficiary, which is the child with special needs. The trustee is your trusted person that you trust will fulfill your wishes and distribute the income and the assets that are in that trust for the benefit of your child with special needs. Within that trust, you would spend for things that are supplemental to what the government would provide, not intended to replace what the government would provide for food, clothing, and shelter. So the special needs trust allows families to leave an inheritance for the benefit of their son or daughter without jeopardizing their eligibility for government benefits.
Now, when you make out your will, don't you have to specifically put that any monies that go to the special needs child?
You can, but the will, don't forget, is only transferring assets that are in your name alone. So if you own assets that are joint, they're going to go to the joint survivor. If you own assets such as life insurance or retirement accounts, they're going to be passed by the beneficiary designation, not through the will. So it's very important that, and our mission has always been to help families plan beyond the wills and trusts. So questions like that of how much money is going into my trust, what is going into my trust for my child? Those are the questions that we always, try and help families get beyond the wills and trusts, because that sometimes gives families, oh, I have my special needs trust, I'm all set.
Right, which is not necessarily true,
right,
unfortunately.
Right. There's a false sense of security.
Now, what type of funding from outside sources like the government, are available for utilizing in a financial plan?
You mean to pay for a financial plan?
To pay for services beyond school age.
Oh.
So there are both federal and state benefits. So with the federal benefits, there's things like SSI, the Social Security, Medicaid. There's Section 8 vouchers, which you could get for residential planning.
Right.
There's also the state benefits, which it's not an entitlement. You can be eligible for it. There's a prioritization schedule for that as well. So
for DDS eligibility or DMH?
Oh, okay,
DDS.
Right, or Department of Mental Health.
Right.
So after age 22, so up to age 22, you have the school entitlement, and then at age 22 is when there's DDS. And the state funding has been decreasing, and that's why there's a lot of advocates out there to push for more state funding for these different programs.
I think too, we say DDS, it's a common, because it's the largest state agency. It's Department of Developmental Services.
Right.
And that agency is of individuals that have developmental disabilities. And so since that's the largest government agency to provide benefits for individuals with disabilities, that's something we typically focus on. But there are other government agencies that do provide supports for individuals that have other various disabilities. The key here is that they're really not entitlements. If the legislation funds the various agencies with resources, there are resources available. If the state does not provide, if the Senate or senators or representatives do not allocate money for the various agencies for the various programs, there's no money. So I think that's one of the key things that we always stress to families is advocacy is really important to talk to get to know your legislatures so that the programs are adequately funded to meet the needs of individual with disabilities.
I see. So if somebody had a specific disability, then they could go to a specific agency
Right, Mass
that
Commission
might
for the
fund.
Blind, right.
I see. Okay. And that is, where would they find that information? Just through?
It's often in the transition plan from public education to adult services. So there's a Chapter 688 law of a transition plan. And so we're in the school system through the IEP, oftentimes will help direct the agency that would support the disability or abilities of the individual.
Okay. Now, how do you calculate costs? Which is always really hard. How do you calculate costs to continue the current services for the future?
So what we do is that this is an excellent question. It's a question that you try and identify something specific. What will something cost? The analogy we always say is that yes, college funding. How much does it cost to go to college? Well, it's pretty easy. You got UMass, got Harvard. If you're fortunate enough to be in Harvard and maybe get a scholarship. In this business per se, it's extremely difficult to identify the cost. That's why a lot of times we work with other agencies to have a person do an evaluation to determine what type of supports will be needed for someone to live, say, in a supported living arrangement. So an agency may come up, all right, here's the different cost. If your child lives alone, they may need full-time, one-to-one person with them full-time living alone. It could be extreme. It could be over $200,000 a year for someone like that. Wow. Other would be if you have a person that can't live alone, but they can have a couple of roommates. So you pretty much would cost this out to determine what would the cost would be if there's one roommate, there's two roommates, possibly three roommates. We're really getting away, the state is getting away from this large congregated living where there's 12 people living in one room.
Group homes,
homes. So it really boils down to the cost is really dependent upon the type of services the individual requires to live. What our job is to work with people after you get an estimate of the cost. From there would be to really work with the parent and say, what can you, as an individual family member, what can you personally, how can you plan for yourself with the resources that you have? Unfortunately, the world everyone doesn't have millions of dollars to provide for their child, which there may need be. So we help with parents to prioritize things, have them set reasonable goals for themselves, and also work with them to identify some of the different entitlement programs which may be available to a family member.
Like Section 8.
AFC, Adult Family Care.
Oh, okay.
There's another one,
Yeah,
a PCA, which is called Personal Care Attendant. These are federal government programs that where money is available for a family member to seek out, and with some guidance, they really identify the appropriate. There's certain steps that you follow to secure those benefits.
Okay. Does anybody else want to say anything about this?
So the balance, as John said, the balance is what can we receive from government benefits, and if families have resources, how do we supplement? So there's different stages of wealth that would plan. Some families, they would be fully dependent upon what the government could provide for their son or daughter. Others would want to supplement some. Some, the third tier would be, I want to supplement I want to be primarily providing and let the government supplement what I can provide financially. And then others that will fully fund and not have any government benefits come into play. So there's 4 different tiers of wealth and how we address the planning.
Can anybody afford this, though? I mean,
Well,
seriously, when you start and think about it, $200,000 or $300,000, $1,000 a year.
Again, that would be for someone
Medically
maybe medically challenged, behavior
Yeah.
situations. In a lot of cases, that person that has extensive needs may be prioritized by the Department of Developmental Services, where they will get full residential funding. So I think the thing is, if you work with someone who is a good planner in this business, they can really help you seek a balance between what do I need with my spouse? What do we need financially for our lifetime? What is extra? For some is extra, what can we really afford? If we can't afford it while we're living, how do we plan for when we pass away? I think I would say after working with many families, I think the idea is being able to work with someone, have them strike the balance. What's for lack of better terms, what's the sweet spot that says, all right, what do we need for our retirement security? What can we do to supplement our son and daughter? And the end of the day is you do the best you can, and you really being able to maximize the resources that you have to, again, to help a family set reasonable expectations, reasonable goals, so that they do the best they possibly can.
We always say the analogy of when you're in the airplane, put on your oxygen mask first, parents, before you tend to young children. So we want to make sure that parents are financially secure for themselves first. So we take care of the parents first.
What happens when the parents are not financially stable? Then what happens to their child with special needs?
So the planning would be for the parents to, even if they don't have any resources, we don't want to jeopardize any of the child's eligibility for government benefits. So we need to make sure that there's no more than $2,000 of assets in the child's name, because that would disqualify them for a lot of Medicaid benefits. And as John said, that would compromise their adult family care benefits, or probably personal care assistant benefits, or their SSI, supplemental security income benefits that Alex had mentioned earlier. So the planning would be focused on protecting the eligibility for their government benefits.
Okay. Now, how often, so I know we touched on this before, but how often should parents review and update their financial plan? As you said before, it should be on a yearly basis?
The letter of intent. We encourage families to at least check in at least once a year. But if they're continuing wealth management clients, we're managing assets for them, we're checking in much more frequently with them. If they've purchased life insurance, it's important to review that life insurance and make sure it is still current, it still meets the needs and the goals of what you've done.
Okay.
So at least once a year, I guess, right? You think?
Yeah. No,
or if there's a change in a family situation, a disability or death or health, employment.
So we have to keep up to date with that.
Stay in touch.
Okay. Now lastly, what are some common mistakes that people make in financial planning? Anybody have
Alex, you have
some?
We do have quite a few.
I'd like to say too is that briefly here, I think one common mistake people have is that they don't do anything. I hate this. It's an easy thing to say they don't do anything because they're not sure of who, if they pass away, who would be here to help. A lot of families we meet with don't have a family member. Unfortunate enough to have a daughter who will be there when you take over, and that's a common thing.
Right.
And so one thing
common.
we really stress to have someone to say, look, no one's ever going to replace a parent. No one's ever going to do as good as you did. Not possible, but create a team. And I think the thing is, people have to recognize, go through a process of identifying some key people in their lives who can serve the role of trustee, who they may not be able to be the trustee themselves, so they may not have the professional expertise. Identify that person that cares the most about your son or daughter, and then position them so that they can hire professionals to carry on. At the same time being, though, give them the letter of intent, give them instructions, because that family, that person who loves your child the most or cares about your child the most, give them control to fire the professionals if they're not doing a good job, to give them the power to really identify people who will carry on after they go away.
Right. That's important. Very important.
It is.
Is there anything else that parents should be careful about?
I think just talking about
Communicating the plan.
And I know when my family kind of started talking about it, we were sitting around the Thanksgiving dinner table, and we were saying, what's going to happen if you guys are no longer here? And both my parents, my mom's very active, and my dad's very active, planning. So I kind of knew that there was something set up, but we didn't really all talk about it. My brother and I are sitting next to each other, like, well, he's going to live with me. No, he's going to live with me. Well, he's not going to live with either one of you guys. So, okay, well. So kind of just having the conversation and, having them be involved, or as much or as little maybe as they'd like to be, but just kind of talking about it.
I have to say quick, she was pressing, and she did a great job pressing us to make sure we communicate all these plans we did, because we tell people to do it. Alex pressed, and we ended up in a great situation because Alex's love for brother and pressing us.
Yeah. Well, it's important, I think, that you know what's going to happen. I, for instance, have 2 children with autism, but I do have an older who probably will take the brunt of all of this, and it's hard. you know.
But she doesn't have to do it alone.
Yeah,
That's the
and
most
that's
important.
really hard, and maybe someday I'll talk to you about it. But anyway, well, I thank you very much for being here today. I think that you've touched on a lot of subjects that people are very interested in. It is a solid financial planning. It is solid financial planning that ensures the future welfare of children of special needs. Parents, if you haven't already started your financial plan, now is a great time to begin. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on You're Not Alone, Surviving Your Child's Disability.